Just fix it in post.
Okay, this is a career.
Things like creative directors and approach.
Wow.
Fucking A. I am absolutely there.
Clients wanting more for less.
Dude.
This mix of creativity and technology.
We've heard around the world. People were freaking out.
Welcome to Just Fix It in Post.
Industry insights straight from the source.
I'm your host, Sean Rice, and welcome.
Some people take the road less traveled. This guy takes the road nobody in their right mind would ever drive on. Born into off-road royalty, with legendary racers Rod and Ryan Millen in his DNA, he's built his own legacy, pushing the limits in trophy trucks, rally cars, and just about anything with wheels. Whether it's tearing through Baja with Terrible Herbst in a trophy truck, or co-driving with Jay Leno in the Mint 400, or just throwing a Toyota sideways for a high-speed commercial, he's no stranger to controlled chaos. And when he's not defying physics behind the wheel, you'll probably find him bombing down a mountain on his bike. Because apparently, pavement just isn't exciting enough. Buckle up, because we're about to get our pants dirty with Ryan Millen!
I mean, I'd say that I'm excited to have you on, but you make me nervous, so. There's always that.
Why?
Hold on, I made the intro too long. I make a note. Short and... All right. So, you just got back from winning the Mint 400.
We got a win, but yeah. We did race it.
You did race it.
Yes.
Did you finish?
Yes, we finished.
You finished, but didn't win.
No, we did not win our class.
All right. I just wanted to make sure that you were saying that. But you got in, I was watching. So this is the cool thing about races now,
Yes.
is that it's no longer me calling your wife and being like, is Ryan in the car now? But
Yeah.
it's on YouTube.
Yeah. There used to be dots on a screen. She would watch our GPS tracker move. And then sometimes the trackers wouldn't update. And so everyone would freak out and call her. But yeah, now we have in-car live footage from the fact that we have Starlinks attached to our race cars, and they just broadcast that, and we have a whole team doing it. Helicopter footage, it's like a full production now. So it's bringing off-road racing to everyone.
Tell me a little bit about this race and your position in it. Like, did you qualify? Are you coaching? Are you co-driving? Are you racing? What's kind of your...
Well, I've raced with the Herbst family. I think this is going on the 7th year now. So kind of originally just started racing with them, with the boys, as we say, Ed, Tim, and Troy. And then as their sons came along, they asked me to start coaching their boys. So a couple years ago, we would do races where I would qualify and they would ride with me and I would show them all the ropes. And then I would co-drive with them and help them come up to speed. And so I've trained the 4 grandkids basically. And I race with one of the boys now. So this last race, he qualified, and then I did the finish, which he did the first 2 laps, so he did about 200 miles, and I did the last 200 miles.
Cool. So this kind of gives you a chance to kind of play in all the realms of racing.
Yeah, it's super. It's really, it's cool because I get to give back in a way, and you don't really realize all of the tips and tricks you've learned over the years, and then to sit down and try to explain that to a 20-year-old kid that's, has no experience, you don't understand why you're doing things, and then you're now trying to explain why you're doing things. So it kind of helps you understand almost the bigger picture with the sport. And desert racing is probably the more challenging of all the forms of racing that I've participated in, just because it combines, all the skills from road racing and all the skills from rallying, and then you have this dust factor, and it's a chess game, and so it's interesting.
It's kind of a way of saying, I've been aged out, but at least I have a refreshing look on what I'm doing now that I get to tell other people how to do it. People in what you do don't really age out unless they explain to you, like what's kind of
a lot of car racing, there's a certain element that you can age out. There's certain different disciplines, like some of the younger guys are better on the Formula Ones where their reflexes are faster. And then, we joke a little bit about once you have kids, you slow down. And I think that's completely true. And I never wanted to believe that until I had kids. But, some of the form of racing that I'm in is so challenging and so difficult, and there's so much experience that you need that you really start hitting your prime in your mid-30s. And I see guys that are so very competitive into their 50s. I think some of the challenges there is your vision maybe goes. So you may, some of the older guys maybe aren't as effective at nighttime. So you'll kind of move the pieces, you'll move your team around and put, those guys in a beginning of the race when it's really crowded and there's tons of cars and dust. You put the veterans up front. It's very cool to be able to have a sport like this where you still continue doing it. This last year was my 20th Baja 1000, and I'm 40. So, it's pretty cool to keep getting after it and doing it and learning. And I still find there's areas where I'm always improving, and young guys come along and they push me. And it's like, oh God, I don't want to race that fast in the dust. But you know, there's these own challenges that you can create and make for yourself to keep you striving to reach for the top.
Now, you've always been into projectile vomiting when co-driving. So how is that kind of affected when you started? I mean, I feel like you've moved past that now. How have you adapted to that? What's your secret?
Yes. I have been known to throw up even driving. But yes, co-driving is hard for me. You know, these vehicles move like boats. They have so much motion and there's so much wheel travel. They move around a lot. And a lot of it's mental, you know, a lot of it's kind of taking it easy on, you know, stopping alcohol a few years ago. That really helped, to be honest with you. I got sober a few years ago just because it wasn't doing me any benefit. And I don't think I've gotten sick apart from food in Mexico. I get sick in food in Mexico pretty regularly.
Really?
Oh yeah, that's pretty. I think, yeah, the last, what we do, 4 races in Mexico last year, 2 races I was throwing up week of.
Really?
This Baja 1000 I was throwing up day before. Just I ate something wrong. We bring our own food as much as possible, but I'm at the point now where I'm like, okay, I won't brush my teeth with the sink water anymore.
Really? I feel like we were like bred into this entire thing, but it
just doesn't get any better.
It doesn't get any better, huh? I feel like, yeah, it's funny. I feel like as you get older, you kind of, while fixing one problem, develop another. It's kind of amazing like that. Obviously, well, tell me a little about your dad and your brother and kind of growing up like that and how that influenced where you're at.
I get the question a lot is, how'd you get started in this sport, you know? And there's a couple different ways to get started, but the way I got started is my father made a career of it. And, you know, so he went through all of his ranks of rallying through New Zealand and came to the US with Mazda backing. And man, he chased all sorts of, he moved from rallying to doing road racing stuff. So on the Daytona 24 hours, he did the short course, Mickey Thompson. He did a little bit of the Baja 1000s. So for me, just growing up, I thought it was normal, you know, to play baseball and race go-karts. Getting exposed to it, what you don't realize from having parents that are into it is they pass on a lot of knowledge that and exposure to other people, head start, let's say. So once I started go-kart racing, it was kind of like, whoa, you know, this is how I've seen it done, and this is how you should do it, whether it becomes a preparation of the vehicles or physical preparation or, you know, racing tactics, all that sort of stuff. You're exposed to it. So, you know, he worked with Toyota, Mazda, Hyundai. So he worked with some of the best engineers in the industry. So you had access to talk to guys about, hey, what about this setup or what about this or that? And you just kind of became the normal to see a factory-backed program. So I think it kind of gives you this leg up it helps you get started, for sure, is the best way to point it.
So did they want you to do that? Or was it something you were just like, I'm just going to get backed right out of school? I mean, when did you start? What was kind of the first thing?
It was definitely, you know, I got exposed to dirt bikes early on because my dad was racing Mickey Thompson, which was an off-road stadium series in the 80s and 90s. They raced at the Coliseum, Anaheim Stadium, you know, it traveled all around the Western United States. And so kind of like the sideshow was, you know, kids under 10 racing dirt bikes. We call it the Pee-wees.
Right.
So that was kind of my first exposure. And then as I became a teenager, it was available, but it wasn't pushed on me. So it's kind of one of those things where, yeah, I played the stick and ball sports a bunch. And then I kind of was like, you know, about 13, I was like, you know, I want to try this go-karting thing. It wasn't a big stretch to get started in it.
When did you make the transition to like off-road?
Yeah. So the transition from off-road was interesting because I'd been mostly road racing. So I'd been focused completely on that. And I tried out for Red Bull's junior team to go to Europe to race Formula cars, you know, single seat, open wheel cars. My dad had gotten a ride in Baja. It was a 2003 Baja 1000 and it was in a buggy. And I was just going to co-drive with him. Well, it turns out it was a father-son team and they were running 2 cars. So I was offered I went down pre-running with him and got to see it all. And I mean, it was like, I've never been hooked more. You know, I kind of avoided off-road racing at that time because my dad had made a career of it. So I was like, I want to pave my own way. So I thought road racing was the way. Back to that first Baja 1000, man, I was like, wow, this is incredible. The adventure, the scenery, we're racing on beaches and mountains and rocks and deserts and dry lake beds and silt and sand and, you know, all in the same day. It's like the diversity is incredible. So that turned into just a life passion. So I think I was 19 and and I never looked back.
How did you get from doing races with your dad into your own kind of racing?
Well, we did the Baja 1000 for a few years, and I was still kind of road racing back and forth. And then I'd kind of gotten a few rides with some other people and would just kind of finish up races. And then Toyota had come to him. It had been a few years, I think 5-ish years since he'd raced with Toyota, and they'd just come out with the FJ Cruiser, or they were coming out with it. And so it was supposed to be this passing of the torch of the old Land Cruiser, the FJ40 to the FJ Cruiser. So it was, Mr. Zaplicki had the idea of both of us racing together, passing of the torch, father to son. And so that kind of got me in the door with Toyota, and I started making those relationships and understanding how they work and how their sponsorships work. And we did 3 years of racing with them, and it just kind of grew and grew.
So doesn't an FJ get like 180 miles a tank?
Yeah, not much.
But, so you're changing how do you do 1,000 stopping every?
Yeah, no. Well, we did. Part of the rule is you can't use a stock fuel tank, so we put a bigger fuel tank in it. Off-road doesn't get good fuel economy, let's just say. I think we were getting 6 or 8 miles to the gallon. So I think every 100 miles or so we stop back then, and we would get serviced by our crew. And we had 4 chase trucks or something like that. So we'd get 20 gallons of fuel, look over the vehicle, and they'd send us on our way.
The first thing we were on was with Racer. I believe it was you and Andy Bell, Jamie Bestwick racing a Tundra, almost stock-ish.
Yeah.
In the Baja 1000.
Yep.
I feel like you've been kind of going off and had been doing races kind of on your own ever since then.
Yeah.
It seems like marketing opportunities had come up that enabled you to race, and then vice versa. So how's that kind of played into your career?
Yeah, those kind of, the marketing events are really interesting, and they would use a race to kind of make it a marketing event. And so I think that was about 2014 Baja 1000. I raced with Andy Bell, Jamie Bestwick in a stock full Toyota Tundra. And so that was a peninsula run. And we won our class. Everything went really well. And then from there, it was kind of like you springboard with all that positive energy. And we were able to kind of roll that right into a rally program into 2015. It was kind of like, well, what the questions start getting asked with different groups. Well, that within Toyota, well, that's a really neat thing you guys did. You raced the Baja 1000, which is one of the hardest off-road races, and you guys did it with a stock vehicle. Like, what else can we do? And so, a lot of racing programs end up being kind of, we joke and call them moon buggies. As you can see with these things, there's nothing that's production on them. They're race cars. But to take a stock vehicle and showcase what it's capable of kind of, is not the normal. So we kind of took that energy and boarded onto what people would consider not a very sexy or exciting vehicle, which was the Toyota Rav4, which at the time, was their second best-selling car, which as we were rallying it, not particularly to us, but the market has shifted, and now it's their number 1 selling vehicle.
Right.
So, what can you do with the Rav4 that's exciting or interesting? And you look at where's Rav4 not selling. It's not selling as well against Subaru. So it's like, well, Subaru directly competes in rallying. They make vehicles that are, WRX, World Rally, is what it stands for, World Rally Champion. So, how can we go and play in their, sandbox? So, you got a lot of pushback. A lot of people go, no, you can't race a Rav4 like that. And then on top of that, we picked a class that's open. You could change the engine. You could change the gearboxes. You can make the car a lot faster. But kind of my takeaway from racing the Tundra was, well, we might not be the fastest, but we know that Toyota has done thousands and thousands of, engineering hours and testing and development. We know the vehicle is going to be robust. So I'm like, let's leave it stock and let's change the things that'll give us the most performance, which in that case were shocks and brakes. And we left the engine alone. We left the transmission alone. We left the main wiring harness alone. We knew all that stuff was so robust because race car stuff has development. It takes time to get the kinks worked out, where we knew those kinks would not be an issue. It's just a few race car parts we put on for a little bit of performance. And yeah, we did that for 3 years, and we ended up 2017 USA National Rally Champion in the two-wheel drive class, which was open. I think we had a perfect season last year, so it was a pretty cool experience. From there, it kind of springboarded to, I was doing a little bit of desert racing, and I was really excited to race more unlimited class vehicles, and I chased that.
Obviously, they launched that program because it was a marketing opportunity for them to basically kind of compete with Subaru. So what were some of the marketing opportunities that came up while you were doing that?
Some of the stuff that kind of parlayed, along with some of that the rally stuff and the Tundra stuff, was they started doing an ad campaign, the TRD Pro campaign, So we kind of moved off that Baja win, and we got to we conquered volcanoes in Chile. We went to Alaska, and went up to Dead Horse, Alaska, so the far north. I know at one point, I don't think it ever got released, but they went to Hawaii with it. I wasn't involved with that one. But no, there was a lot of cool different challenges that we took on. It was a really neat experience, and again, showcasing what a production vehicle is capable of.
Right. So what about with the rally program? What type of marketing did you guys do with that? Because I remember correctly, I remember your co-driver, Christina, who's also your wife, and not for that reason. I think it was the other way around.
Yeah.
And then I remember her climbing some rock formation in Times Square, and I was thinking, they get to do the coolest shit ever. Like, what other opportunities came up like that?
No, there was the rock climbing deal that Christina got to do in Times Square. That was really neat. I know that pushed her out of her comfort zone because she had to do a bunch of rock climbing training for a couple months before they did that. We had a little bit of a web series where they covered, at that point they were trying to educate people on what rallying was. And so there was a lot of information on what goes on between us as far as driver, co-driver. There was some lifestyle stuff that covered it. They focus a lot on pushing through journalists and traditional media. So, every rally we would have traditional media with us. And so we would show them, kind of what the sport's about. They would come with us on our pre-run. We call it reconnaissance or recce. And we'd show them, what we're doing. And they'd see the vehicle. We'd do ride-alongs. They'd see, what the thing was, capable of. And then they would get to see what the roads we were on, And part of that whole selling the Rav4 in areas where Subaru was stronger was that Pacific Northwest. It was the Minnesotas, it was the Maines, and they're rough, nasty roads and country that's really difficult for vehicles to be reliable in, and showing them that they're capable of it. And I think we were the most proud of the fact that they did see, when they did evaluations each year, they saw market share gain in every one of those markets over Subaru. So it was very positive.
Interesting. Did you notice a particular birth or acceleration or growth in the fan base for your particular audience? When I'm in the Midwest, it's all about pickup trucks and stuff like that. You don't hear everybody being like Toyota this and Toyota that. It's always Ford Chevy this, Ford Chevy that. So when you were in places, were you seeing, people that were like, oh, the Rav4, did that kind of make it cooler? Or what was kind of your observation from that?
It's really difficult to get people to, especially car culture, men especially, to really change their opinion on things, especially vehicles or brand of vehicles. And I do like to think that we slowly chipped away at it. We got to see some families that definitely opened their eyes and would come to you and be like, we never really thought of this vehicle as capable or any of that sort of stuff, but we ended up buying one. So there was some real world validation that was really neat to see. And part of one of my dad's racing programs was in the Midwest, like you said, and it was short course racing. And it was when the Tundra had first come out. So he'd race it in 99, and that was the goal. That goal was to sell trucks in those areas. And that's how Toyota kind of, picks up their marketing, is you have to go for hardcore enthusiasts is what you have to go for. And then they trickle down to their friends when their friends come to them and ask them, hey, is this a legitimate product? And they go, well, it is. I think the funniest thing for me though is we're 7-ish years past, 8 years past the end of the rally program. And I've had a few people come up to me and say, well, you guys couldn't have won in a Rav4. No, that thing was modified. No, it was heavily modified. No, they had a gearbox, or no, they had a built engine or turbos, this and that. And it's neat to, hear those whispers of people that couldn't fathom to this day that we could win rallies with a production vehicle like that. And an SUV, a large vehicle. Rallying traditionally is a small vehicle for power to weight. Why would you market those small cars? The US doesn't buy them. What do they buy? 13 or 15,000 Yaris's where they sell 500,000 Rav4s? Well, that's the most important. So that's the area you choose. You try to help them market through racing. And that's the tough part for us for finding sponsors.
When you were growing up, your exposure to racing was like TV, magazines, stuff your dad was involved in. Obviously, they didn't have the coverage that they do now, like they do YouTube, things like that. Where do you see the younger audience kind of getting their information from? Where do you guys build your audience from? Is it organic? Is it at the races? Is it online? Is it social? Is it and then what is that audience doing? How are they participating?
Yeah.
Are they creating their own content? Are they building their own vehicles to race? Because I know it's a very expensive sport. So how does that kind of work?
Man, I tell you what, it is really challenging these days to make a career out of motorsports compared to my dad. He at one point had 3 manufacturers. He was racing Pikes Peak with Hyundai. He was racing off-road with Toyota, and he was racing rallying with Mazda in Asia Pacific. those days are a little, they're long gone, let's just say. Nowadays we really kind of engage with our audience online through social media and social posts and things that we're doing. And then we have to quantify that value to our sponsors, showcasing, what are we producing and how many people are viewing it. And I think, guys like Ken Block completely changed the sport. Before, it was so focused on what your results were. And we called it, winning on Sunday and selling on Monday. But now you get guys that, put together great videos and have interesting content. They're getting much more sponsorship dollars. So it's a little tougher for the true racer for results. There, if a few guys just sat on the fact that they had wins, and it really didn't showcase the value to sponsors, and they lost sponsors. And I know that's a tough one for a lot of people, but you really have to bring value to those sponsors, and they need to see ROI, like, at the end of the day. So whether that's social media posts or YouTube blogs, or I've tried all the different ways, and there's value in all that. So that's what the sponsors want to see. Or you can go the gentleman racing route, which I've gone a little bit too, where you race with guys that want results. Like, I race for a team that's focused on that. They'll do all the other social media posts, and they do a great job of their live feeds, but then there's the discussion of results. So I kind of feel like I've hit the happy medium between both.
You're doing all this rallying for Toyota. You guys finish your seasons up. The program ends. How do you get into racing trophy trucks for Herbsts?
Yeah. So when we'd raced that Tundra in 2014, the Herbsts had built the truck for Toyota. So that I got my initial introduction and got to know the family a little bit. And they had a customer that was a Toyota owner. He was a Toyota dealership owner in Texas. And so he had requested to have them build him a spec trophy truck, which is a trophy truck with a low cost engine, let's say, less horsepower. And so, I'd kind of gotten asked to race with him, and we did a couple races, and we ended up getting a few different, qualifying pole a few times. And I think the Herbsts were seeing at that time, they had just started to make their own they started making their own chassis. So the first one I had been racing, and they had built their second and third. And so they were looking at this as a business, as a potential to sell trucks every year. So I'd been getting good results, and that kind of just naturally they started asking me to race with them. And that would have been 2018 is when I first started racing with them. And it kind of just grew from there and expanded.
So you're really into building trucks. How much you build these things from scratch, or I noticed it seemed like you brought back the Shark, right, for them? And then, so how did you even get into, you just bored in the shop, or what, how that come up?
Yeah, I don't, I think it's kind of the challenging part about being in this industry, as is wearing multiple hats. I would love to just drive race cars all day, every day. I would love to just film commercials all day, every day. But sometimes that stuff ebbs and flows, and you kind of figure out how to make filler. And, a few years back, I want to say 2013 or so, I founded my business, and I chased some tours in Baja. I tried a lot of different things, but what we've kind of settled on is building and maintaining race cars and repairing them, and a few classic cars and things like that. And it's actually been extremely rewarding. I didn't know I would enjoy running someone else's racing program until I started doing it. And there's challenges, showing value again to them, and showing that what money they're spending with you is turning into performance, and it's some of my knowledge from running factory racing programs and trying to kind of mold that into gentleman programs, and how can we get the best with with what resources we have, how do we get those best results, and how through some of the coaching how can I help them drive faster, and the things that I've learned. So it's kind of morphed into a little business, and it's been thoroughly rewarding.
So how often do you have DNFs and they blame you because you built it?
Oh, yeah, that's a fun one. Yeah, for sure. We do have DNFs, and, sometimes, there can be simple problems, and it's something that, has to fall on our shoulders. But I kind of tell my customers that it's one of those things where, we're building a program, and there's always going to be areas we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay to a degree, but we can't make the same mistake twice. So a lot of times if we have a failure, we look at it, we dissect it, we figure it out, and we make, the changes necessary and implement other processes. Or is it something as simple as clamping pressure because the bolts are backing out, or, so you kind of figure out the ways that you're going to do it to try to mitigate those failures. But sometimes in these programs, like the resources to throw new parts at things all the time. Off-road racing is brutal on parts. So we get to a point where we're like, well, we know we're risking this right now. So we're all okay with this. We're all communicating. As I think if we're all on the same page, then we understand the risks, then we can all move together. But yeah, it's definitely, I remember my dad telling me, you're never going to stop selling yourself. And I hate selling myself. It's not something I like doing. I'm not a salesman.
I know, I don't like you for it. So
Exactly. But you constantly, I constantly have to remind myself, like, whether you're selling on your wins or you're selling on your positives, whether it's customers or racing or whatever, it's like some people do that really well, and it's just, they're always in your ear, and it's something that I don't do naturally. So I have to, it feels like bragging to me. So even with the social media posts, I feel like I always have to be striving to continually improve at that.
you've been pretty consistent with your social media usage. So how has that changed for you since, I would say over the years? Like, does that, I look back, you can see the Rav4 stuff all the way up until now. So what's your role now? Are they giving you footage and you're cutting yourself? Are they, how does that, do they see, the collaborations and all that stuff?
Because of our team, and we have monster backing and some pretty large companies, they give us the resources at the end of these races with a lot of content. So we end up getting, drop boxes full of either just images from a few photographers that are kind of not on staff, but they're paying them for the year. We have our own helicopter, so there's always helicopter footage. Or with them, we do photo shoots, or we'll do a couple content shoots during shakedowns and stuff. So we had an FPV drone. There's this kind of constant content kind of farm that's giving us stuff to continually post. Because as much as I would love to be able to film and shoot pictures and drive, it's a little challenging.
I've had the unfortunate pleasure of hiring you on jobs to do shoots and motion and all that other fun stuff, which have been fun. Despite, I think that's probably why I kept asking you to come back, because just even if it was a total shit day, we're in the middle of nowhere and stuff was broken, it was like, at least Ryan's here. So how did you even get into that? How did doing commercials and stills and launching vehicle campaign, how did you get those opportunities?
Yeah, no, again, that's one of those weird, how do you get involved in the film industry as a car driver? But again, this took me a long time to get out of the shadow of my dad and my brother, it's a really cool shadow to be in, but it was tough to get out of it. One of those things where they couldn't do non-union work because they were in SAG, and they'd flick me non-union stuff. And one day something came along and I did the job, and they're like, well, you're union, right? And I was like, no, I thought you knew this was non-union, and I was like, so I got Taft-Hartley into the industry, and it just kind of grew from there.
What's one of the most memorable things that you've done that was,
well, besides spreading your camera gear all through Baja?
Well, that wasn't a commercial, that was voluntarily.
It was not. No, I'd say one of the most funs we did was the TRD Pro Challenge in Chile. I'd always wanted to go to South America. We went down there for 3 weeks. We only filmed for 4 days, but they used me a lot more, and the director was very people focused. So we understood how to tell a story, but he didn't know anything vehicle wise. So I was a vehicle expert. So he would look at a volcano and be like, we drive up there, right? And I'm like, no, we can't. We could, but we might spend all 4 days trying to do that. Oh, okay. Well, how can we get as much value and showcase and what those vehicles are capable of? And I think at one point we almost lost a vehicle because we were on this super soft volcanic hillside, and we moved back a foot and it would move over 2, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. So it was neat using all your skills to retrieve the vehicle before we lost it. But yeah, that one was probably the most fun. But it was the filming days are grueling, to say the least. I remember that one was something like, we had 14 or so hours of daylight, and then we had an hour or 2 travel time from hotel to location. So it was something like 4 hours or something of downtime for 4 days. It was pretty brutal.
So you also did the Alaska trip. What was that? So how does this stuff come up? And then, give me an example, just kind of walk me through that in terms of the approach and when they call you, because I remember you calling me and being like, I got to buy all this shit on Amazon that I've never had to buy before. What the hell is this stuff?
Well, it's like we're always trying to figure out how can we put these vehicles in the most extreme environments. So, the ideas get bounced around. What about here? What about there? What about this? And Alaska had come along. And, I remember thinking, you guys want to go to Alaska? in the end of November. I had to miss a Baja 1000. And I remember thinking, like, why would we go to Alaska? Like at this time of year, above, I forget, whatever, at that longitudes, I think it's latitude. At that far north, there's no sunlight. The sun never rises and never sets. And I was like, I'm like, guys, this is going to be a little silly. Like, it's freezing, we're going to Fairbanks and starting from there, we're going up Dalton Highway. And boy, I was wrong, to be honest with you. It was like 6 hours of perfect light for filming. So yeah, it was like you crammed the 6 hours and you got everything you could in that 6 hours. And it was just beautiful light. There was no harsh light. It was always beautiful. And then you had, 18 hours of darkness, but
Yeah, there's that aspect, it's the dark part.
But I remember at one point I was like, we were in a little town. It wasn't even much of a town. It was like a refueling depot sort of thing.
So you're doing like an entire drive from top to bottom? Or?
No, we did, the route took us from Fairbanks to Dead Horse, Alaska. And we stopped in like Coldfoot or something like that. And it's not a super long route, and it was all paved. It's really maybe not as gnarly of a challenge that we'd done, but I think the challenge was how cold the environment was. And it's a paved road, but it's basically an oil route. There's pipelines and all sorts of stuff, and a storm was starting to come in, and just kind of, it was all hero beauty shots. It was car porn, as Paul Zaplicki would call it.
How was the weather? Like, I mean, what kind of obstacles did you run into? Like, these things never go smoothly. Like, I can't imagine that, like, you put you in the harshest condition with 6 hours of daylight that it's going to be perfect. Like,
well, yeah. So the you got the challenge of going to Alaska, which is, big enough as it is. But then the next challenge you have is a lot of times you're dealing with pre-production vehicles. So these are vehicles that are prototypes. So they're worth millions of dollars, and they have 3D printed little pieces to hold on bezels, and nothing is production. So the things are falling apart.
They're Franken-built.
Yeah, they're and a lot of times you're dealing with electrical problems or this and that. And I remember one of the bigger problems we had is they just brought out these factory Rigid lights. So Rigid's an aftermarket off-road lighting company, and they'd partnered with Toyota, and it was really early in the relationship, and this is not normal for Toyota. So they're showcasing these parts, and they're breaking, like, because they're 3D printed. They're one-offs.
Right.
They're not production runs, so it didn't reflect what would happen in production. But we have to showcase. So we're having to you're having to shoot the car at different angles, and don't slide too much and show the other one because it's falling out, or there's always those little hidden little tricks that you're kind of trying to make work.
So knowing Paul, there was always an ulterior motive to having somebody who was also a mechanic on a job where he needed a driver who he'd be like, oh, hey, you could fix that. Or I'd show up to Germany to shoot, an 86 reveal, and all of a sudden the door would open. There would be no stripes on the car, and he would look at it and be like, oh, you can fix that, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Sounds familiar.
Well, there was, I've been fortunate to work on those super high-end budget programs, but as things change, their budgets are getting smaller, and they got to get as much as they can out of it. When I was a kid, I remember going on some of my dad's jobs, and they would have 1 or 2 locations in a day. They would that's all they would focus on, and they'd have crew out there picking up trash and all that. Like, it was a big production. And now the things have changed, and they're how many locations have you done? What's your maximum locations on a shoot?
Like 12.
Yeah, they are brutal days.
Yeah. They'll even add locations the day of to shoot at, and then add to the shot list for sure until it totally breaks, and then get mad that you didn't get it all without going over budget.
Yes. So it's things have changed a lot.
But don't let me forget the direction changes halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, you got to count those in.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot to them. So I think as you've seen, I get grumpy after a while, especially when we start getting lax of sleep.
Oh yeah. I'm familiar with Ryan too, for sure. Yeah, no, definitely.
And it's one of those things you kind of adapt and you get through it, and they're fun. I'm lucky I don't do it all the time.
People always ask me how close we are, and I always say, well, I had to call his wife once, and I learned that was the wrong thing to do.
Don't wake her up. She's not a morning person.
Do you know where Ryan is? I'll find out, and then you'll be dead.
Yeah. No, good times.
So you, so what's involved with the production now? Because like obviously before we couldn't watch the races you do live or anywhere.
Yeah.
We, they'd film it and then cut it up and then you'd watch it, a week or two later.
Yeah.
What, like now it's like a full production. It seems like when I went to go watch the Mint 400, there was the Mint 400 broadcast and then Herbst had its own broadcasts and it seemed like it was per car number, right? Is that,
Yeah. So
so how does that work?
the Herbsts have their own kind of team that are in the helicopter working in the broadcast, and they kind of get a bunch of stuff already figured out, but each vehicle has 2 cameras on it, and we have 3 race cars, and they mix between the 2. So if one drops, or one camera fails or whatever, then they might switch to camera, from camera 2 to camera 1 if one's not working. And then if that whole truck just drops, then they'll pick up from the helicopter or they'll pick up. So it kind of, I don't know exactly how they're doing it from switching between. I don't know if it's a physical person or not.
A switch,
Yeah.
a switchboard or whatever.
But yeah, no, they kind of preload it with all the information of who's the driver, who's the co-drivers, and no, it's really cool. And then on top of that, we have direct links to the cameras, so we can kind of see what's going on. So yeah, so I can follow my race car, and I can see, like this last race, it's a loop race. So we did 4 laps of a 100-mile lap. So I can watch my teammate go through the whole course, and I can look at the course and be like, oh yeah, I see where that's a big boulder in the way, or oh that's a problem, or so it's kind of neat in that sense. And then the wife can watch it, kids can watch it. It works in some bad ways though. I think the last race the 1,000 we were leading and we ran out of gas, and I was super disappointed after spending 14 days down there. And it was just a small issue that caught us out. And then I got insecure afterwards. I'm like, oh, I hope I didn't say anything because the camera's sitting right here, I asked some friends, and they're like, no, you were fine. But we were all super disappointed because, you have the whole world with you, and you're so used to, I'm in Nowheresville. There's no lights. I am in absolute nowhere. There's no race cars coming yet. It's like you're sitting there by yourself and you're just like, oh, I can't believe after all that work, but the world's with you. So it's good and bad for sure.
So what do you do to prepare for a race? Like I've pre-run with you, unfortunately, and I've had the luxury of being completely dirty for 12 hours in a single session, and then getting to sleep in a hotel room that was also dirty, covered with frogs. I think it was ojos negros,
Cats and fleas.
something like that. Yeah. With the brown water specialty. So how do you, other than pre-running, like what's kind of is it mental? Is it physical? Is it like, what do you, I like to get a massage and a haircut to just like chill out. What's kind of your pre-race?
It is a mental sport. I think there's hand-eye coordination. It's not an aerobic sport. It's not like you're an Olympic athlete unless you're talking about like maybe shooters or something. It's hand-eye coordination. There is a lot of use of your body. You're in those race cars for at a minimum of 2 hours, sometimes 8 plus. I have done a Spa 1000 solo, so that was 20 something hours. They each have their own kind of program that you kind of go to, and you kind of need to figure out where you're weak, but neck muscles are super important. But for me, a lot of it is just training my brain. So I do a lot of mountain biking. It's what I like doing. They're like little stages sort of thing. They're like little 3 to 5 minute downhills where my heart rate is high. My brain's having to process things at low oxygen levels sort of thing, or high heart rates. And that's kind of worked for me. Treats their own with some different guys, but there's a lot of work goes into the pre-running and understanding the course and where you're going, and I enjoy the work, and it's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort, and it's quite frankly really uncomfortable most of the time. So I think off-road racers are masochists. Like, we love the pain, we love the challenge of it, and that's what keeps drawing us back. It's not an easy sport to be successful in.
You're in there for hours. How do you stay focused the whole time? I mean, I feel like, especially with attention spans nowadays, it's like, I feel like our phone trains us to be even shorter attention span. So what's kind of the...
I don't know, it is hours and hours and hours, and trying to stay focused, and you have this person next to you that's continually explaining the road coming up, and you have to be inch perfect. And the races in the past, those guys could change a transmission, and so that'd be half an hour or something like that. The races were more spread out. Where now we knock a tire off, you can get a flat, you're out of contention. There's no way you're going to win that race. And we're changing tires in a minute to 3 minutes. we're sprinting these things now, and they're endurance races that we're sprinting. So I think you are so in focus and so like 100% that there's really not a time to deviate too much. We get some speed zones where we try to relax a little bit and try to hydrate and eat, but like eating's an important one for me and keeping that blood sugar up. I've noticed when I make mistakes, it's when I've done a poor job of eating, quite frankly.
Interesting.
Yeah. Hydration's a tough one. I struggle because of the bumpy roads. I can't actually go to the bathroom where, you know, a lot of guys can. So that's a big thing for me, is trying to balance my bladder with, as I get older, it's getting tougher. So I'll do IVs the day before. That seems to help me a lot to get hydrated. And then I'm very careful on race day about caffeine. And then caffeine became something that I need to do a couple days out so I don't have a headache on race day from caffeine withdrawals. And so it's kind of like, as I've gotten older, I've gotten a little wiser and kind of figured out my program. So it doesn't feel like much to me, but I have a set kind of, I'm not superstitious, but I'm just a little stitious, as they say.
So do you feel like, have you like DNF less as you've gotten older? Do you feel like, or
Yeah.
especially with technology and stuff like that?
Yeah, you know, I think there's less of the silly mistakes. There's less of the crashes and the dumb stuff. I've gotten more mature and understood when to attack and when to just sit and be patient. You know, there's the way these races work with the dust and everything, it makes it really difficult for us to make passes. So sometimes you might just go through a section and you're just waiting. You're waiting for that person to hit a flat tire or have a mechanical issue. And then you might, you know, the way the roads travel, the wind is so important to us. So, you know, you might be going into a headwind, so the dust just doesn't scatter and you're stuck and you're falling back and the guy's pulling away from you. But you know there's a junction up here and you're going to get better on the dust. And so you kind of have to be strategic and just be patient. You know, you see younger guys are very fast.
Right.
I see that. Like, they are so fast that it makes me constantly question myself. Like, am I getting soft or am I getting slow? But comes the race day, you watch them stub their toes. They make silly mistakes. They get that flat tire they drove on for too long and it rips the caliper off because the wheel got smashed. And it's like those little things that you may not be as fast, but you're not having the issues.
I mean, I feel like in the mid 400, you know, the other team car was way up in like 6th or 7th, something like that. And you were back in, by the time you got in, he was like 19th.
Yeah.
You took it, it seemed like you got this bar at like 9th or something like that.
Yeah, I think we finished 6th. But yeah, we got it delivered in 19th. And
I mean, that's
sometimes,
impressive.
Yeah, no,
I know you just walk right through it, but like as somebody who's like,
it's a fun one. I really enjoy it. You know, I enjoy you know, how that strategy works, because so the race in the beginning is it's like watching, you know, 5-year-olds play soccer. It's like this hive. All the race trucks are together in this dust pocket, and then they start falling out and they start dropping out, and then the race starts to expand and weed out. And so if you put me at the end of it, the last half, then I don't have as much, like, you know, of those, let's say there's 13 cars that we passed. I think, you know, 4 or 5 of them were just broken from attrition. So the other ones were just, we were just faster than them. And you get sometimes where guys get held up together and they're just holding each other up, and then you sneak up and you pierce through one and then you pierce through the other. And it's, you know, just knowing that track and the experience, and it's really fun. It's probably my favorite, because you'd think that a race car driver would be like, my best race was the one I won. Those are like the worst races. They're like no fun. The ones where you start from the back and you battle and you get a 6, you're like, dude, that was so cool. I think the Mint last year was a similar situation. We got 3rd.
wow.
It was like, yes, you know, you take those wins because they're so much fun, but you still have to look at like, well, we were 30 minutes back, you know, so you kind of look at it and then you start looking at lap times, you figure out where you still sit in the whole game of things, but it's still a good time.
How's technology made its way into what you do? Because I imagine, like, you know, you could probably make one of these autonomous a 1st and 50-year-old that is going to go and do its thing. So
yeah.
How is that kind of?
You know, there's a little bit of technology that's kind of creeped in with off-road racing, but it's not. I still think we're pretty behind all of that, because there's a lot of just getting the vehicles to finish, and there's just so much in just beating the terrain first. But I see us in the future, active dampers are starting to get involved now, so active shocks.
What does that mean exactly, active shocks?
You're starting to use you're starting to be able to use position sensors to see where the shock is and where the vehicle is, and in relation to the you know, where the suspension is in relation to the vehicle. So I think in the next 10 years time, how those shocks make changes will be I think that'll be our biggest improvement. You know, materials wise is not changing too much. The steels we use are still, There's not a lot there, but light infrared cameras.
You go out, you pre-run, you pre-race things.
Yeah.
You have LiDAR of all these locations. Like, wouldn't there be a way to replace the co-driver with an AI version of the best, literally the best race line to take, even with, like, I imagine with the technology that, something like a Tesla would have, you'd be able to use some of the predictive, like, terrain technology to say, like, inch right, inch left, things like that. Is that making its way into what you do, or?
It's not. And to be honest with you, I'm probably not the best person to ask about any future technologies because it's not my world, I guess. But yeah, I mean, are we open to using all those different, like, yeah, I mean, if you could map the terrain and you knew, I mean, just so simple, if you map the terrain, elevation and things, you could figure out gearing.
Right.
So we kind of taken our kick, stab at gearing and be like, oh, we should run an aggressive gear. We should run an aggressive converter to match it. And so we're really not there. But I think that's the really fun part about off-road racing is the manufacturers are not involved with the sport anymore. Manufacturers bring big dollars. They really advance the sports fast. And they make it, quite frankly, cost prohibitive for other people to participate. So this sport, up until about 5-ish years ago, was actually very cost effective. But we've made a big jump with now going to all-wheel drive trophy trucks and things. So we're starting to see guys were doing 5-6 races. Now the vehicles cost so much more to prepare them, costs more, everything costs more. So they're starting to shrink down to 4 races a year. So, as we go as far as organizations and sports and how we want to continually see it grow, we kind of have to come together and make that decision of what technologies do we want to allow and what technologies do we disallow. Which is, it's a tough one. Yeah, we can make the sport safer and faster. Like, what if we had, our biggest challenge is dust. Are there technologies to see through the dust? For sure.
Interesting. Right.
For sure there is. Would that be a huge improvement? Absolutely. Would we run over more spectators because a race truck went by and they walked right across? Possibly. I don't know. Would the heat signature show up? And so I don't know. It's kind of like, how do we figure out where we want our sport to be? And there's some technology we're going to have to adapt, whether it's the really cool videos and recordings. But some of these guys are, one of the teams we're racing against got disqualified from their live footage. From their live footage showed one of their chase trucks coming backwards on course to come save them. Boom, DQ. So it's like, you have to think through these things. Like, one person made a mistake, but it's broadcasted to the world. So I think some technologies are great. That's a really good thing. But other ones we have to figure out, is it really adding value to our sport, or is it going to make it more expensive? So I don't know. I'm not the person to decide on that.
Has AI made its way into what you do at all?
I don't think so, but I assume it has with Formula One. I assume that's where Red Bull has gained such an advantage with strategies and all those things. Like, I assume.
So you don't use it in race planning or anything like that?
Our industry is still very much seat of the pants. So,
Right.
Where our industry costs a lot it costs a lot in vehicle preparation and things, but you take road racing, it doesn't even compare when it comes to the cost of engineering staff and personnel. And so, in a way, it's kind of a cottage little industry that's done in Southern California and Southwestern United States. And a lot of people don't know of it, For us, we have big entries. We have 35, 40 vehicles that people come from around the country, but 20 years ago, it was 10s and 15s. So, social media has expanded it. A lot of people are more aware of the sport. And it's generally been a good thing.
Is it broadcast nationally, or is it?
Some of the races are broadcast nationally. I believe the whole Score series is broadcast on NBC, but who watches TV anymore? I mean, I feel like I'm an adult that's never had traditional TV. I've had streaming or, non-traditional.
Do you guys make your own shows to then sell to, distribute, to channels like Netflix and things like that?
Yeah, the race organizers are kind of in charge of all that because they limit what you can and can't do with events, so they're very they want to kind of see their I know, I don't know the best word to say it, but the race organizers,
the politics.
Yeah, they limit it because at the end of the day, it's their show.
Right.
So they don't stronghold us too much on making little YouTube stuff or whatever. Like, I like to make little vlogs, and I find the most views I get is from people just watching raw onboards. It blows me away. I'll put up 8 hours of raw onboards and have hundreds of thousands of people watch it. I'm like, who watches this for 8 hours? But, you know, a lot of people will chime in and say, oh, you know, I just turn it on in the garage while I'm tinkering on my car or whatever. I just, you know, I make a playlist and there's a bunch of races in there and it just goes through. And there'll be stuff from rallying. So then you'll hear some of our onboards and you can see us changing tires. And so, you know, it blows me away how many people love seeing that stuff. And sometimes they'll put helmet cameras up so you can see what it looks like from my point of view to go past another race car at 100 mile an hour in the dust and rocks. And
I'm sure one day they'll have like a catheter cam.
yes.
With that, we'll go to 10 questions.
It's
Time for 10 questions. Is that a yes or no, or what do you think?
10 questions.
Growing up in the Millen family, as you did, right? You were there? Okay, good. Yes. Was there ever a moment you thought maybe I'll do something other than driving?
No, there was never a moment where I thought, you know, it'd be way cooler to do something other than racing.
I'm familiar with your other skills and I agree. So
Yes.
you've raced everything from rally cars to trophy trucks. What's been your favorite type of racing and why?
Oh, rallying is where my heart is.
Really?
Yeah, rallying is where my heart is.
It was the saunter.
Yeah, it's challenging to find that. But no, rallying is, it's dancing with a car. It's beautiful. It's poetry. It's the relationship you have with your co-driver and the timing and just, it is an out-of-body experience because you are at 110% whizzing by trees that can really hurt you, if not kill you. It's just, it's 100% focus, concentration, out of body. It's incredible.
You spent years rallying a Toyota Rav4. What was the biggest challenge of pushing an SUV to its limits?
Cool. Man, I tell you what, a Rav4 is not an ideal rally car. It's the best way to put it. Man, I tell you what, the biggest challenge was with a Rav4 was the fact that it was heavy, it was big, it was reliable, but we were not fast. That was not a fast vehicle. And, you know, to make that thing fast required me to drive above my skill level. And, you know, there were some races you just had to settle into the fact that there were faster cars and those guys made, you know, wise decisions and you just had to wait for them to have a mechanical problem. And sometimes it happened and sometimes it didn't and you just had to settle. It was super challenging knowing going into the race that you were always going to be the underdog. But it was so rewarding. Like if you didn't win, it was like, well, you got a Rav4. Like, what did you expect? It's a stock
Right.
car with an automatic transmission. That is not what you're supposed to rally. That is not a race car. But then when you did win, it was like always a bonus. Like, I can't believe you did that. So it was like, you know, it was really fun time of my life.
You've done stunt driving for major brands like Toyota, Lexus, Chevy, and I think GM.
Mm-hmm.
What's the wildest thing you've had to pull off on set? I know we've done some rock crawling I regretted you doing, but other than that.
Yeah. You know, most of that stuff's pretty tame when you look at it. A lot of times it's 25 to 35 mile an hour.
True.
You know, with a camera car and trying to figure out some of those moves. I think the scariest stuff to me is when we do night shoots on the freeway and they'll have us make the taillights not work because we need to sit in formation, so we're using the brakes. So when you're getting on the freeway with no taillights and blacked out vehicle with tinted windows and that stuff just feels so sketchy to me.
No, I know this. They love those. The motion cars with the tent is kind of a double-edged sword there. I never thought about that.
Yeah, that one's challenging. And then there's always that little bit of like people hanging off those things and making a mistake and hurting people, and it's nerve-wracking, to be honest with you. And those long hours, they're tough on you. You're
part of the legendary Terrible Herbst team.
Mm-hmm.
What is it like working with a team that's been a dominant force in off-road racing for decades?
You know, it is super rewarding to get to race with the Herbst family. Their legacy starts from the 60s. I mean, you know, when people ask me, what team do you race for? You know, oh, you were there, you were at the Mint, or what team? And you go, oh, I was with Terrible Herbst. Like, whoa, really? You know, there's not been many drivers that have raced with them. So to be part of them as their professional, you know, counterpart is pretty neat. You know, they've been at it forever. They have a wonderful program. They have great team. They kind of give you what you need to succeed. So it's a lot of pressure, you know? It's a lot of pressure and a lot of people that want that seat.
Right.
I'll be honest with you. So you have to constantly deliver. And you know, they're honest. If you make a mistake or, you know, they're going to call you on it. So you got to be perfect. And it's a lot of pressure, but I mean, I enjoy pressure. I thrive with it. So I look forward to it. So it's good with me.
You're known for precision and endurance in qualifying. What's the secret to consistently landing in the top 3?
I'd say the secret with qualifying is rallying. What people don't realize is when I went rallying is they were, you know, 1 to 7 mile stages and you did 30 of them for a rally. So it's like we have one qualifying session. It's no different than a stage or a rally. So it's all that pressure in one shot, and rallying taught me how to do it. So it's easy.
You co-drove with Jay Leno in the Mint 400. How did that come about, and what was that experience like?
Oh, that was a neat experience, you know, because Jay is such a car enthusiast. To get co-drive with him at the Mint 400, I want to say it was like 2016. It was pretty wild, you know. It was interesting watching Jay kind of adapt to racing a production truck, and you know, some of his, you know, he's obviously extremely funny, but you know, he's like an adult child. Like his ADD would kick in, he'd be honking and waving at people, and it'd be like Jay, focus, you know. So it was cool, you know. It definitely, I've gotten to do a few different filming things with him. I've been on Jay Leno's garage a couple times, so I spent a bunch of time with him, and you know, listening to him and his car knowledge. And I like obscure engines, and he loves obscure engines and like jet engines or jet propelled vehicles he's really into. So it's been cool to build a relationship with him and kind of, you know, see what his passions are, and hang out with him.
So you guys stopped to flip a car back over. How did that happen?
Yeah, we did. I forget about that.
Buggy behind us? Yeah. Let's look for a spot. Oh, okay. I don't think he's gonna pass me right now. No, that's true. Seems to be doing about the same speed we are. Now, is that the rule? Do you have to let the guy pass or no? Yeah. Otherwise, he can hit you. Yeah. I mean, you're not allowed to hit us, but yeah, I'd hit you if you don't get out of the way. Hey, that's that guy that passed us. Well, I'm glad we're not the guy that rolled over. Yeah. See, what other racing do you stop down?
Tell me that story.
Oh, what were we up on? Joshua Tree Highway or something like that, and somebody was blocking the course. So you'll see this in off-road racing where you're like, you don't really want to help your competitors,
right.
But sometimes you're forced to. I was like, well, we can't get around him. We need to figure out how to yank him back and flip him back over. So yeah, I think we flipped him over. I can't remember if we got stuck or something, but you know, it's always one of those things where you're like, I need you to like, you know, hit the gas. Like I need you to like, I've been in a situation where like, I need you to hit this vehicle to get it out of the way. And it's like, well, what do you mean? And then, you know, somebody will just bump it. I'm like, no, I need you to hit this thing, like ram it out of the way. And in this case, I think he basically like yanked it lightly. And it was like, no, I need you to like yank it. So it's pretty fun. Like you get yourself a little bit of pickles out there, let's say, in the middle of nowhere, and you kind of have to get creative.
What makes a great automotive commercial from a driver's perspective, and how does stunt driving bring a brand vision to life?
I think for what I like to see, you know, I like to see those big slides, and the things that I look for more than anything is looking at how many tries the guy did. You can see all the black rubber, and if you see a shot where you see nothing but black rubber and black rubber and black rubber, it's like, man, that took him a few tries. I like it when you see a guy do it one shot. That's pretty neat. I mean, obviously they need to get a couple more in the can, but when they can get it first try.
You've worked on major campaigns for Toyota, Lexus, and GM. What do you think makes off-road and performance marketing so compelling for audiences?
You know, that's a good question. What makes it so compelling for audiences? You know, I think obviously we kind of have this like light in the sky, like, you know, this is what you think your vehicle is capable of. We don't need our vehicles to do that all the day, but I catch myself driving a pickup truck or an SUV that's got four-wheel drive. And, you know, for me, it's having a vehicle that I know is capable and reliable. So I imagine that's what a lot of other people want to see is, oh, this thing's capable of it. Yeah, I'm not going to do it every day to the grocery store. But man, if there was a situation where I needed to off-road to get somewhere, it's like, yeah, I'll suffer and pay the gas mileage, you know, the poor gas mileage. So I have that capability. I assume that that's what people kind of are gravitating towards.
10 questions!
Knowing what you know now, what advice would you have for your younger self as a driver, as a race car driver?
Oh man, I tell you what, knowing what I know now and this far into my career, you know, I think I would, as I touched on earlier, I would definitely focus on understanding like you are going to be selling yourself. It's just something you're always going to be doing. You know, you're always going to be on camera. You're always going to be telling people about your wins.
It's like, don't be as much of a dick as you.
Yeah. Yes. Be more social. Be more social. And you know, this is not something that I was strong at. You know, it's amazing how much of sponsorships are relationships and how much of racing paths are relationships. And it's a lot of, you know, what you know and who you know, and how can you build those relationships with industry people or, and they take a lot of work. They do. They take a lot of investment and time. And how can you foster and nurture those relationships? Would probably be my biggest thing I would teach my younger self, or Tom.
Speaking of Tom, what advice would you have for somebody looking to get into being an off-road race car driver and stunt driver?
It would be, if I was talking to my own son, it would be like, hey, this is gonna be a tough sport. It's not getting easier, and I don't know. Their generation might become exciting for their generation, and it might be more authentic, and people will gravitate toward it. I don't know. But for my generation, it's been more than challenging. There's very few of us that have been able to make it through, and it's one of those things where you got to figure out how you can get by and wear multiple hats and do different things, and don't be a one-trick pony.
Do you have a fear about anything that you do when you're racing? Is there anything that you worry about?
No, the only thing that I ever worried about when I was younger was getting paralyzed. That was the only thing that's ever, which this sport can have a lot of back injuries. So it's probably the only thing that would be something I'm not too.
But you don't worry about, there's nothing that really that sits in the back of your head. I mean, obviously that just takes away from what you're trying to do, but
yeah.
But in terms of overall umbrella fear, there's nothing that.
No, it's a tough one because, if you lived your life in fear with this sport, it would be, it's a risk sport. You constantly are, I don't fear so much of my own decisions. It's when the vehicle has a problem and I'm stuck in a situation where I'm out of it and I'm vulnerable. So I try really hard to make sure I'm not in that situation. I race with an awesome team that has a helicopter, that have medics. So I think we mitigate it, but everyone thinks that they're not taking risks. So, it'd be silly not to. So, I just don't think about it.
Where can people find you? Where do you exist online?
Oh, I think my favorite form of social media is Instagram and YouTube, to be honest with you.
And that would be, they could find you at?
Oh, Ryan _Millen _ I think it is. Between the two.
YouTube, what is it?
I think it's Ryan Millen.
Get it.
I forget, honestly. Had the YouTube for so long. I like the YouTube the most because I actually make money off it. So that's cool.
Oh, you do? So how does that work for you? So obviously you're a content creator. What do you, how many subscribers are you looking at right now?
I think I have like 4,000 or 5,000 or something like that.
4,000 or 5,000?
That's mostly non-subscribers that'll watch my YouTube from what I can tell.
Now, is it hours? Are you in shorts from the stuff that you're doing?
No.
And putting that up? It's just straight up your YouTube channel.
A lot of times, yeah, it's just my YouTube channel. And a lot of times I just put up raw onboards.
And how long have you had your YouTube channel for?
A little over 10-ish years, I want to say.
How many views are you getting per video? And then how often are you posting? And
yeah,
how does YouTube monetization work? Like where do you make money from? And how much?
I'm not making a lot from the YouTube stuff, but I think, I'm putting anywhere from, not many videos these days. At one point I was really focused on putting on vlogs and all that sort of stuff when I was really trying to build the channel. And I built it to an okay amount, but it's really just a hobby kind of thing. And maybe it's $1,200 a year or something like that. It depends. Sometimes I'll have videos that go, I'll have a video that I really like. I'm like, this was an awesome race, and the algorithm doesn't pick it up for whatever reason. But then I'll have other ones where you're like, well, this was a boring race, and then it'll have hundreds of thousands of views. And then some of the stuff will get repopulated. It just keeps getting views. There's videos that are 8 years old that are like still getting views. So I'm like, well, that's cool. So I don't know, at least in that regard, like all that work feels like something. Where Instagram, I know I need for sponsors and all that sort of thing, but it doesn't feel like it returns much to me. Where I'll get people that'll like comment and timestamp different sections and ask me questions about it.
Right.
The only negative is I think my competitors have watched it and it's helped them get faster.
Interesting. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Like literally showing you.
Yeah. A lot of guys don't show that stuff because you don't want to see it, and sometimes when we're in Mexico, we can race off the race course and have lines. So, I'll try to pick and choose pieces so they don't get to see if there was some area where I was made a really good choice on a line. But
interesting. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, YouTube's cool like that. I enjoy it.
Cool. Well, as long as I've known you, it's cool to finally have you on.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for taking your time out of doing nothing to be on. I appreciate that.
Of course.
And I think that's a wrap.
Sweet. Just fixing.
Well, that'll be boring. Nobody will watch that.